Hello and welcome to the Nightmare on X Street podcast. I am your host, Andromeda Jones. This is a podcast where women come to share their experiences with their ex-boyfriends, husbands, any ex that was horrible. I created this podcast because we have so many men that come out and talk about how horrible women were to them. So I wanted a space where women can do the same and express things that have happened to them that many women may have shared experiences with and feel like they're alone. I bring on guests weekly to talk about things they've been through. Hopefully it resonates with some of you and helps you in your healing process along the way. I'll be sharing some things about my life also on this podcast. So it won't just be my guests coming in. I hope you come in, have a good time. Today, my first guest is someone I know personally. Amazing woman, amazing playwright, amazing script writer, just all around, just a great person. So she'll be sharing her story, and I welcome to the show, Miss Tori Lee.
Hey there.
Hey, Tori. So give us a little background about yourself as a person.
Well, Tori Lee moved to Dallas probably, I want to say, about 27 years ago from Richmond, Virginia. I'm at currently, well, I write plays, and currently I just wrote my very first movie script. It came out about, my very first movie came out about 2 years ago, I want to say. And thankfully you were a part of the production team, and you actually had a role in the film. And I really don't know what else to say about me. So much I can't say, but I know we have a limited time to on your podcast, so I definitely want to get into the meat and potatoes of everything.
Yes, let's please get into that. So, as I explained to my guests before they come on, we're not going to use real names, so the names you
Right.
hear are likely not real. I ask that my guests are truthful and honest in their experiences. I don't verify the stories people tell me. Whatever they say, it is Bible and law to me. I ask that they give as much information as possible without giving details that'll lead back to the person that was a part of their life story. So without further ado, Tori, I ask that you take us kind of from the beginning when you and your ex met. And then throughout, I may ask you a few questions, but just kind of walk us through it.
Okay. So I actually met my ex. I mean, of course, everyone can go back and watch the film, and they'll see exactly how I met my ex. I actually met my ex. My
But
friends
before
and
you
I.
go ahead and give us the name of your film.
Oh, it's called Why Women Trip. Okay, so that was we started it off as a stage play, and then we turned it into a film. So I actually met my ex. My friends and I. Um, let me just start over. So what happened was I was dating someone, and he happened to pass away. So my ex called me looking for him, right? And I just happened to be on my way out of town, and my friends and I were all in the car, and the number came up, and I was like, I don't recognize this number, so I just answered the phone. So when I answered the phone, he asked me, hey, can I speak to Don? And I was like, yeah, I don't know anybody named Don, so I apologize. I said, no, I do know him, but he's passed away. And he's like, yeah, well, I was looking for you as well because he listed you as a reference. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, I'm headed out of town. My friends and I on a much needed vacation, so I apologize. I have to talk to you later on. So he was like, hey, just so happened I'm where you're headed to. And I was like, oh, okay. So he said, I hope this doesn't sound odd or anything, but can I come and take you out? And I was like, I thought about it for a minute. I was like, no, this is kind of creepy. And he was like, no, seriously, I would like to take you to have a drink. I know you've been through a lot. So let me just come pick you up, take you to have a drink, have a good time. So I was like, okay, fine. So, not harmless, just a drink. So then he did let me know. He's like, hey, I'm in my company vehicle, so I don't have a rental car or anything like that. So hopefully that you'll be okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine with that. So just because he was really honest with me, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go out with him. So he came to pick me up. We went and had a drink. I had a great time. I mean, like, I was really vibing with this guy. Like, vibing with him so much that I left my freaking cell phone at the restaurant. So that's how much I was in tune to this guy. I was like, our conversation was amazing. I mean, we had a great time. And honestly, he was just so sweet. And I was like, this is the sweetest guy I think I've ever met. So from that day forth, we had been inseparable. I mean, everything just moved really fast, like really, really fast. I think we got married in either it was 6 or 9 months within knowing each other. I don't remember. It was, I think maybe we got proposed. Maybe he proposed at 6 months and we got married at 9, or either we got married within the first 6 months. I don't hold me to that. I don't remember, but it was somewhere along the line. It was a long time ago, so it was somewhere within those lines. But that's pretty much how I met him. And after that, it was, as your podcast, a nightmare. It was,
So, what was the first sign that mm, after the marriage? What was your first sign that this might not be what I thought this was?
now the first sign was the mother calling all the time. Like
Okay,
I
let's
was
talk
just
about the
like,
mom.
yeah, I was just like thinking to myself, is this really your mom calling you, or do you have, women calling you like this? I mean, the calls were like nonstop, like back to back to back to back. And I was like, okay. And I mean, I'm looking at his phone and it says mom, but these days people can, plug anything in their phones and it could be anybody. So I was like, okay, is this really this guy's mom, like really calling him like this? So I was kind of turned off by that. But then I was like, okay, maybe they have a bond that, you know, I don't know about. Maybe it's, maybe they're just really close. So I kind of let it go. I let it pass and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and go out with him and continue to go out with him. So I remember that he asked me to meet his mother and his grandmother. And I was like, ooh, this is kind of soon. Because it was probably within the first month of us getting to know each other. So I was like, ooh, maybe no, maybe the first 2 weeks. So I was like, ooh, meeting your people, that's kind of soon. So he took me to his house. Well, here's where the lies begin, and I should have been paying attention. He told me that his grandmother lived with him. So and women, we all know, when you walk into somebody older's house, you could tell by the decorate, the
Yes, the
decor,
furniture,
yeah,
or
the
even
decor
the smell
screams,
sometimes.
yeah, the decor screams 60s, 70s. It didn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't like nothing 2000ish. So I was like, okay, so your grandmother lives with you, but clearly all the decor in here is hers, right? So I'm like, okay, no big deal. So I met his grandmother and his mom. They were like sweet as pie. But what should have turned me off, the very first question his mom asked me, she was like, what are your intentions with my son? Because I want my son to get married. And she's like, how do you feel about marriage? So I felt like at that moment, I was like, ooh, I mean, it totally caught me off guard because,
So it's like you the man in the relationship. That's the question a father asks the man.
yeah, she was just like, what are your intentions with my son? Like, I want my son to be married. And I was like, oh, okay, And I mean, like, when I tell you I couldn't answer that question, I was just like so shocked that she asked me that. I was like, ooh, okay. But I mean, I was able to answer her. I told her, of course, I want to be married. I mean, I had been married before, right?
Okay.
He was my second marriage. So I was like thinking to myself, like, ooh, of course, I think every woman wants to be married. But I'm thinking, like, why is she asking me these type of questions? But I'm totally not paying her any attention. So I just answered. I answered the question. She's like, okay. And so she was very, very proper. She's like, okay, well, thank you. And I mean, and that was it. And I think I looked at his face and he was more shocked than anything that she asked me that question. So the look on his face was like, oh my God, like, mom, why did you say that? But I was expecting him to say something to her, but he didn't. He just kind of let it go, let her ask the questions, and he just sat there and like in shock, but he didn't say anything. So I was just like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, what a way to start off meeting someone's parents. I mean, I was just like totally shocked, but that was my first encounter with his mom. And that probably should have been a big, big, big red flag, but I kept it going.
Okay. So you meet the mom, you've met the grandmother, you're already blown away by the first flag. So let's was there anything after that with anyone else in his family or friends leading up to the point of marriage, or was did everything else kind of start after the marriage happened?
Everything started after all the remaining of the red flags, they started after the marriage. The
Were
mother.
there any flags while you're planning? Like, was she overbearing? Was she trying to have too much input?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Oh, she picked the venue. Um, she did everything. She picked the venue. So I wanted this lavish, like, of course, women, it was my first real wedding because the first time I got married at the courthouse, right? So I wanted this like extravagant wedding. I'm thinking of doing all this. I mean, I'm thinking about the violinist playing. I want everything, right? I want people hanging from the ceiling. I want all type of shit. But she came to me and she was like, hey, she called me one day. She's like, my ex, he had a very tight schedule. He could never get off work, right? So she was like, well, he reached out to me and asked me to help you with the wedding planning. I was like, okay. So I gave her a couple of places, a couple of hotels that I had in mind. So we went to go visit those hotels it was a Saturday. Oh no, maybe it may have been during the week. It was definitely a day during the week because I had left straight from work to go there. So we get to the hotel. We go to the first hotel, which is the hotel I picked. She's like, kind of like it, but I don't. So then we go to another hotel. She was like, I don't like it. The third hotel, oh, this is it. I can see it in this ballroom. I can see everything. So she tells the lady, she's like, how much is the deposit? I'm going to go ahead and pay the deposit now.
Oh, so she did pay.
She paid the deposit.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So she said, she's like, my husband and I, we're going to pay for this. We're going to pay for the wedding. We're going to pay for half of the wedding. So I'm thinking to myself, like, I didn't need her to pay for anything. I was like, no, I don't think that's a good idea for her to pay for half of the wedding. So anyway, moving forward, I'm thinking to myself, I really don't like this venue. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the venue, but I like the venue across the street a lot better. But since she said that she was going to put her coins down, I was like, okay, we're going to go ahead. We're going to go with the venue that you're going to pick because you're going to use your coins, right? So she put the deposit down and she knew some people that work at the hotel. So let's be clear. Okay. So I think she got a little discount or whatever, right? So we, I think the moment her and I fell apart, she wanted to go dress shopping with me. And my response to her was, I feel like that's something that my mother and I should do alone.
Absolutely.
I was like, I think that was a sacred moment and I want my mother and I to do that. So I said, here's what I'll do. I'll take pictures of me in the dresses that I'm choosing and I'll send them to, that I'm trying on and I'll send them to you. I'll send you a text message. She was like totally against it. I want to be a part of the process. So at that very moment, her and I kind of bumped heads because she wasn't a part of the dress process. So she was a little upset because, it was just my mother and I. It was just us two there. And that's who I wanted to be there. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and my best friend was there because, of course, I needed them to find their dresses as well. So at that very moment, we bumped heads. But, and then another thing, it was the cake tasting. She wanted to be a part of that as well. And I was like, no, I think that's something that my husband and we should do because, it's our wedding. So she was like, okay. She was very, very overbearing. She was like, okay, y'all go ahead and do what y'all want to do then. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So that was another red flag that I did not pay attention to. She was just very controlling, very overbearing. And then too, I thought maybe she's this way because he's her only child. So I was like, okay, maybe she's this way. He's her only child, and this is how she feels about her son. But it got worse after the wedding.
Okay, so let's go to the wedding day. How was the wedding day? Because you've had this kind of fall apart because she didn't get to participate in the things she wanted to participate in. Was it tense? Did she fake it till she made it through, and then things changed? How was he during this process? Were you communicating with him how his mother was acting and how it made you feel? What was his thought process?
So he's the type of person that he's very quiet and you really can't read him. Like he was such a sweetheart. I really couldn't read him. I didn't understand. I didn't know what was going on. Like the rehearsal day, we had rehearsal. She was like, hey, I'm going to pay for the rehearsal dinner. So what she did was she backed out of paying for the rest of the wedding. She's like, my husband and I decided not to pay for the wedding, but what we're going to do, and she didn't give us enough time. She just kind of like sprung it on us. But what we're going to do is we're going to pay for the rehearsal dinner. We're not going to pay. We're no longer participating in the wedding. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to move forward. We're going to pay for the rehearsal dinner. So at the rehearsal, she pulls him and I to the side and she's like, hey, you guys do know it's not too late. Y'all can back out if y'all want to. So I'm like, back out? Like, no, this we all in. We just sent out invitations. We got people coming from out of town. Like, this is it. Like, so she's like, okay, I'm just making sure. So I'm like, yeah. So we get to the rehearsal dinner. Her and her husband, they end up paying for the rehearsal dinner. Now I'm stressed, right? Because I'm like, sheesh, this whole time I've been thinking that they're paying for, they're contributing, helping paying for the wedding. Now she backs out. And I think it was just a ploy for her to say she was going to back out so the wedding wouldn't go on, right? She didn't think that we had our coins reserved. So I was like, okay, so she's backing out. Now we got to come up with all this money. Mind you, we spent over $30,000 on this wedding. So I was like, okay, now we got to pay for everything else. The half that she said that she was going to do it first, since she backed out, we have to come up with it. So I'm like, okay, now I'm stressing because this is like the day before the wedding. I'm like totally stressed out. So I'm sitting in the at the hotel. I'm in my hotel room in the suite. I'm getting my hair and my makeup done. The wedding coordinator comes in and she's like, hey, no, the wedding coordinator comes in after I'm dressed. Cause I'm like, okay, I'm looking at the time. I'm like, the wedding should have started like 30 minutes ago, right? So I'm like, okay, what's going on? So the wedding coordinator comes in there and she's like, hey, we got a problem. And I was like, what's the problem? She's like, well, your fiance kind of didn't want me to tell you because he didn't want you to stress out anymore. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? She was like, someone kissed him and got red lipstick on his tux. So we're trying to figure out how we can get the red lipstick out of his tux.
It better not be his mom.
Yeah. Yeah. So she did that intentionally so that the wedding wouldn't go on, right? So then they figured out a way to get the lipstick out of the tux. Mind you, I swear, it's probably like an hour and a half. The wedding is extremely late. It's like an hour and a half late now because they're trying to figure out everything they should do. So now I'm like really, really stressed. So anyway, the wedding goes on. She, I didn't get, of course, I don't see everything that happens because I come in last, right? So I guess she did this. Everyone said this. They thought it was her wedding, the way she sashayed down the aisle. So they said she walked down that aisle like it was her wedding. They said she paraded and pranced down that aisle. So I was like, okay, I don't know. I don't know what happened because, well, I knew the week after that I found out because I invited some coworkers to the wedding and they told me, they was like, hey, they were like, have you saw your wedding film yet? And I was like, no, I haven't gotten it back yet. It's like, ooh, we can't wait for you to watch it because you got to see how your mother-in-law acted. I was like, oh my God. So I was like, okay, I can't wait to see it. When I finally saw the video, I was like, oh my God, you really would have swore it was her wedding. Like, baby, she hit that run. It was like she was on the runway. I mean, she sashayed. She wanted you to see every piece of her. So the nightmare started that particular day.
Okay.
I'll never forget that particular day. So we had ice sculptures that we had for the wedding, and the mom, the hotel staff, they were getting the ice sculptures. They were about to take the ice sculptures away. And she said, no, my son paid for those ice sculptures. So you need to bring those ice sculptures to my hotel room. So and then in the back of my mind, I'm like, did this dummy not know that this ice is going to melt? Is she going to have all this water? I'm like, she's going to have all this water in her room. So in my mind, I'm like, okay. So let me go back a little bit. The day of the wedding, his dad wasn't able to come. The day we got married, his dad's new wife, her mother passed away. So he had a tough decision to make. Do I go out of town with my wife or do I go to my son's wedding? So he chose to go out of town with his wife, as he should have. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. I think that was the best thing for him to do because you could see the wedding on the tape, whatever. So his mom made a mockery of him at the wedding and told him, look at your dad. Your dad chose his wife. He chose to go be with his wife as her since her mom passed away. I mean, she went in on him. I mean, like he's just standing there bawling, crying. So I grabbed him and I hugged him. I'm like, it's okay. Like, he had a decision to make. He's supposed to cling to his wife. So she said, no, his dad doesn't love him. I'm the only one that loves him. His dad didn't even show up at his own wedding. And I'm like, don't do that. I'm telling her, like, don't do that. Like, this is not the time for that. So anyway, after the wedding, after she decides to tell the people to come and put the ice sculptures, all the ice sculptures in her room. That's what she wants, the ice sculptures, because her son paid for the ice sculptures, and that's what she wanted to do. They took the ice sculptures to her room. Then the next morning she calls because there's all this water in her room. So now she's pissed off because it's all all the water in her room. So she calls me. No, before we leave, when we're getting in the car, we're about to go to another hotel that his friends, they gave us a gift to a very, very nice. I had never even heard of a hotel before, but it was a very, very nice, lavish hotel that his friends, they sent us to for the weekend, right? So as we're getting ready to go we're getting ready to leave, we're getting in the car. She comes and hugs both of us. She's like, "Now y'all go make me some grandbabies." So I'm like, okay. And the next day, the very, very next day is when everything went downhill. She calls me. And what I'm about to say, like, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. She calls me and she says, "Hey girl." And I'm like, "Hey." And she says, "Where's my son?" And I said, "Oh, he went downstairs to get some breakfast." She's like, "Okay." She said, "Well, don't you share this with him. But I have something I want to ask you." And I said, "What's up?" She said, "What happened to your ex? How did he pass away?" And I was like, this is not something that I want to discuss the day after I got, I'm a newly married lady, right? I said, I don't want to discuss that right now. And I said, I've told you, and I had told her before. I said, I've told you before, what happened to him. And she's like, "Well, girl, I heard you killed him." And I said, "What?" I'm taken back. I'm like, "What?" So now I'm sitting up in the bed. I was like, "You say what now?" And she's like, "Don't," this is what she said to me, "Do not repeat this to my son." And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "So you heard I killed him. What, why am I not in jail? How did I kill him?" She said, "I heard you gave him AIDS."
So you hold this from your son all this time after we're married, and then you still don't want me to tell him, your child. You don't want him to tell him. You don't want me to tell him I have AIDS.
Right. So I was like, and now I'm just bawling, crying, because I'm like, why would you make this story up about me? Like, I was like, that is so messed up. Why would you make up this story about me? And I was like, I'm gonna have to let you go because I'm upset. So my husband at the time can't come in the room. He sees that I'm upset. He's like, "What's wrong?" I tell him. So I was like, "Your mom just called me and was like, I killed my ex-boyfriend." And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah. She said that I gave him AIDS." He was like, "Oh, hold on." So he calls his mom. Now this is the one thing he'd never, ever, ever done. He never talked back to his mom. Like, he was very respectful, very mannerable. But when he called, he said, "Hey mom, do not lie on my wife like that. Don't ever do that again." So she was mad. She called me. She's like, "You an old messy bitch."
Not like, the person that called you with the mess. You the messy one.
I was like, "What?" She's like, "You an old messy bitch." She's like, "I told you not to tell my son that." I said, why would I not share that with my husband? I was like, that's something I think that he needs to know. And I said, if you felt that way, you wouldn't have never, ever told us to go out there and make you some grandbabies. If you felt like if I gave my ex AIDS, you wouldn't even be telling me to sleep with your son. Like, I was like, that just doesn't make sense. So fast forward, we're about to go on a honeymoon. He gets sick, right? So now he has to go to the hospital. So we're in the hospital and I'm sitting down next to the bed. She walks in like she's the wife. She's telling the nurse everything that she needs to do. So he had just told the nurse, "Hey, I just got married last week. This is my wife, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "Oh, congratulations, blah, blah, blah." He's like, we were on our way. We were getting ready to go on our honeymoon. And I got sick, so I had to come to the emergency room. Well, it was something very minor. It wasn't nothing serious, right? But he ended up, he went to the hospital about it. So I think he stayed in the hospital maybe one night. So she comes in there, she sachets in there, and she has a box in her hand. So I don't know what this box is. I don't know what's inside of this box, but she opens the box and she lifts my hair up and she puts a necklace around my neck. And she says, "Welcome to the family. I'm sorry about last week." And she gives me a hug. And I'm like, this is weird. Like, why would you, like, you lied on me And then now you want to come in here with a necklace and put it around my neck and tell me to welcome to the family. So I was like, okay. So now, because now I don't really like her. Like I'm like,
Understandable.
I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm watching her now. So I'm like, okay, I gotta watch her now. So it was every week she would call her son and tell him something about me that she didn't like about me. Now before then, you could not beat her from calling me, bringing me gifts. She was like, "Oh my God, you're the daughter I've never had." Like she's a fashion queen, honey. So she would go to the mall, and whenever she was at the mall, she would if she's buying herself something, she's buying me something and bringing it to me, right? But after we got married, that's when, like I said, everything just went downhill. Like especially with that first incident when she called me with the little AIDS comment. I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to fool with her anymore. But I was already all in. You know what I mean? I was like,
Yeah.
dang, I'm in this thing now. So like, what do I do? Like, how do I get out of this? I didn't want to leave him, but I didn't want to be around her. But I knew how tight they were. They were like really, really tight. And he made a comment to me. He was like, my chest is hurting because the two women that I love the most are bickering. And
So
I
through
don't.
this whole thing, he's kind of trying to stay neutral
Mm-hmm.
out of it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. He was trying to stay neutral. He really was. But he really had my back. And anytime he had the opportunity to get on his mama ass about saying something to me, he would. And that's what she didn't like, because she was like, he's never talked to me like this. Like he's never like he's a hi mom. I mean, he's like the really sweet, perky guy that's always hugging on his mom, loving on his mom. So, but when I saw that relationship that he had with his mom, I was like, oh, he's a great man. I was like, I know he's gonna be the man of my dreams. This man is good to his mama and his grandmother. So yeah, I was like, oh, this is it. So, and it's so funny that what happened was right before we got married, we took some engagement photos. So I was a supervisor at a company, and I had my engagement photo on my desk. So just so happened, one of my employees came. She was in my office, and she was like, is that who you're about to marry? And I was like, yeah. She's like, oh my God. Her exact words, and I should have knew it right then. It should have been a damn red flag. She said, how did you get him away from his mom and his grandma? And I was like, what? Not thinking enough. She's like, oh my God. She said, please invite me to the wedding. And she was like, she told me, she said, I used to work for him. I was like, really? She was like, yeah. She said, he was like a great boss. She's like, he was super cool. But she said, that mama was hell. And I was like, yeah. I thinking to myself, I was like, I hadn't had any really bad experiences as of yet.
Okay.
I hadn't had any bad experiences yet. I was like, yeah, she's really a sweetheart. She said, oh, I would love to come to y'all wedding. She said, because I know she's going to make this wedding. I know it's going to be nice. If she got anything to do with it, it's going to be real nice. And I was like, yeah. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll invite you. So I had went home and I asked him about it. He was like, oh yeah, she used to work with me. And I was like, well, she wants to come to the wedding. And he was like, that's fine. If we got an extra seat or whatever, she can come. So I was like, okay, well, I'll invite her. But she kind of warned me. She was like, when she said, I should have known then. When she said, how did you get him away from his mama and his grandma? I missed all the red flags and drama. I missed them all, because he is. And I want to say, I don't.
And it's because they didn't come from him. I think that made it more difficult because they weren't coming directly from him. It's not like he was saying or doing something. It's outside sources. So when you go home and you're not around those outside sources, you're with your person. There's no flags at your house. It's people bringing the flags to you.
Because there were definitely no flags.
Fast forward, the wedding. Now we've done the accusation of AIDS. So at what point, or at any point, does he start to turn? Or does it consistently remain his mother?
No, I'm going to tell you when it turned. One of my employees called me. She had kept calling me, and I never answered the phone, because when I'm off work, I don't take calls. But this particular Sunday, I decided to take the call. So I took the call from her, and I was like, hello. And she's like, hey. She said, girl, God put it on my heart. She said, if you didn't answer the phone, I was not going to call you back and bother you anymore, because she's like, I know you just got married. You got a lot going on. I'm like, yeah, what's up? She's like, you still with your husband? And I was like, yeah, why?
How long have y'all been married at this point?
We had probably been married a couple of months, if I can remember correctly, maybe a couple of months.
And her question was, are y'all still married?
Right. So I was like, what's going on? And And she was at my wedding too. So I'm like, well,
Okay.
what's going on? She was like, I just saw your husband on this date now. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, he's on this dating app. And she's like, it took me, she's like, I was so surprised because he's such a sweet guy. And I'm like, I clearly, like, they just got married. He wouldn't be on a date now. So I'm like, okay. So I kind of noticed he had been moving funny, right? Moving just a little funny. And I was like, you know what? Now that I think about it, he's been moving a little funny. I was like, I remember I was going to go out of town. My mother and I were going to go out of town. And we decided not to go. And he was like very persistent about me going out of town. He was like, I take that back. It was almost a year. It was probably almost a year. Because I remember now we had just right before that it was a year. Because we had just celebrated our year anniversary. And I remember he took me out. I mean, it was a very intimate outing. It was really, really nice. He had hired a chef to come in. He had this really amazing room that he had laid out, gifts everywhere. It was really, really nice, right? So so it was definitely a year in. It was at least a year in. It was definitely a year in because we had just got I remember now because I remember the outing, our anniversary dinner. So I remember that he started moving funny because he was like, hey, you and your mom still going out of town? I was like, nah, I don't feel like going. So he's like, okay. He hangs up. He calls me back. He's like, babe. I'm like, what's up? He's like, go to Enterprise off such. I already rented you the car. You just go pick it up. You and your mom go and have a good time. I'm like, I just told him that I didn't want to go, right? So I'm like, okay. So I ended up going ahead and go. Me and my mom went out of town. And he's calling me, like, constantly calling me, making sure I'm okay, making sure we're okay. I'm like, yeah, we're good. So then what happens, this is the funny part of the story. This is how we always have an intuition of things that are going wrong. So I was like, okay. So I get back home. Everything seemed to be fine. My job asked me to go to North Carolina for 2 weeks. I go to North Carolina for 2 weeks. I took a picture.
So this is after the dating app. You've been told about the dating app.
No. This is before
you haven't been told yet. Okay.
Yeah, this is before the dating app. So I kind of backed it up a little bit. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So when I go out of town, I take a picture, and his mom calls me, and she's like, I see that picture you just posted on Facebook. Why is your ring not on the right finger? And I was like, what? She's like, my son paid all that money for that ring, and you got it on the wrong finger. I said, ma'am, you need to look at that picture again. And she's like, yeah, you're hiding something from my son. You took your ring off. I was like, no, I did not. I said, my ring is on the right finger. You need to look at the picture again. So anyway, her and I get into it about the ring situation, right? So my 2 weeks is over with. It's time for me to go home. I go home. He picks me up from the airport. It just didn't feel right. It didn't seem right. It wasn't like my jolly husband, like happy to see me. Like, it just wasn't that. So that's when the day I got back is the day I got the call about the dating app situation. So I didn't pay that. I was like, oh, okay. So I played it off because, he was in the house or whatever. I was like, okay, I'll look into that. So just so happened, it was just very revealing that he asked me to go in the washroom and to get a roll of toilet paper. He said we were low on toilet paper in the restroom. I was like, okay. So I go to get the toilet paper, and I'm half asleep. So I'm feeling for the toilet paper, and as I'm feeling for it, it's some tickets up there, or paper. So when I picked it up, I noticed that it was 2 tickets, and it was 2 tickets for a movie that was the night before when I got home, and and I'll never forget it. And I don't think I can never forget it. It was the movie was at 10:20 p.m. So I'm like, okay. So this is a Monday because he's in the restroom. He's getting ready for his work week, right? So I go in the restroom and I was like, hey, babe. He's like, what's up? I was like, what did you do last night? He's like, babe, I told you I was asleep all day yesterday. I knew that you were coming home. You had to come home. Well, you were coming home this morning, so I had to prepare myself to come pick you up from the airport. I was like, okay. So I said, well, can you explain these 2 tickets? And he's like, oh, yeah. Me and my partner, Lamont, we went to the movies last night at 10:20. I was like, I said, we got a problem. He said, what's that? I said, if you and Lamont went to the movies at 10:20 last night, then y'all gay. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, if you and Lamont went to the movies at 10:20 p.m., y'all are gay. And I was like, and I got to get out of this marriage. This Negro jumped up. Remember, he asked me to bring him the toilet paper. Jumped up, threw his jeans on. Oh, he didn't even wipe his ass. He was so, because I was asking too many questions. He hauled ass out of the house, right? He left. I'm like, hey, where you going? So I was like, bet. I put me a jogging suit on, and I knew his every move. So I know that he has to go, as soon as he goes to work, he has to go straight to the bank to make a deposit. So as he's sitting in the bank line, I see him. So I go around, I walk around, I open the door, and I sit in his car. I said, okay, now finish telling me about Lamont. Now, when I do that, this Negro, his heart, you should have saw his face. It was like, how the hell did you know where I was at? He's on the phone with his mama. He said, Mama, let me call you right back. So now, it gets crazier. So his mom knew where he was at. This wench sent the police up there. She said she felt like her son's life was in danger because we were in the car arguing. She sent the police up there. So he's like, babe, I got to get back to work. And I was like, no, I'm going to go to work with you then. We're going to figure this out. You're going to tell me who Lamont is. He's like, so he calls this imaginary number.
So Lamont is not a friend you've ever heard of before?
Never.
Got it.
So I was like, we're going to talk about who this person is. He's like, I'm going to, he calls him and nobody answers the phone. He's like, I guess he's at work, babe. I don't know. He's not answering the phone. So I'm like, all right, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go home. I jump out of the car. I go home because I thought he was getting ready to get real bad, and I didn't want it to get real ugly. Not in front of the bank. So I get in my car. His mom. As soon as I get in my car, his mom calls me and she's like, "Hey, I need you to not jump in the car with my son while he's at work and asking him all those questions. Like, you need to do that after the work hours." I said, man, you don't tell me how to run my marriage over here. You stay over there with your little marriage over there and let me run mine over here. So fast forward, this is the part I didn't tell. When we first got married, the only thing that he wanted to change was my phone number. He's like, hey, I want to add you to my cell phone plan so that that's another bill that you don't have to have. And I'm just going to add a line and I'm going to have you go up to AT&T, get you a phone, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I go to AT&T, give me a phone. Now my old phone number is turned off, right? It's totally disconnected. Nobody, no bad blast from the past can call me anymore, none of that. So I guess maybe he wanted full control. So now I have this new phone. I'm on the plan too. So what I did was I got access to the bill. So I go to AT&T and they print me out the bill. So I'm looking at, girl, listen, him and this girl that he met on that date now, baby. When I tell you he didn't even meet her on a date now. Let me back up. He didn't meet her on a date now. They had been on the phone hours and hours and hours. Like the whole time he was at work, he would be on the phone with her. So I'm like, damn. And I'm looking at this number and I'm like, clearly this can't be the guy that he told me he went to the movies with. Yeah. So I call the number and I'm like, hello? And a female answers and she hangs up. I think I've done the dumbest shit in the world that any woman could have ever done. She calls me back. And she's like, hello? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, who's this? And I was like, this is Tori. And she was like, how can I help you? And I was like, this number's been on my husband's phone. I said, this number, it looks like you've been talking to my husband quite a bit. And she was like, well, who is your husband? So I tell her who my husband is, right? She's like, I fucking knew it. And I said, you knew what? She says, my friends told me it was too good to be true. And I said, well, what's going on? She was like, him and I had been dating for like a month. And I was like, okay. She was like, he would always tell me, don't call me after 7:00 because I live with my grandmother and my grandmother's asleep. So don't call me. So she said she fell for that, because what he would do is he would send her flowers, to kind of like, it's like, hey, just kind of ease her mind. Like, okay, I really like you. I'm gonna send you some flowers today. I'm gonna take you out I'm gonna take you to Applebee's because she told me that he used to take her to Applebee's. And I was like, okay. So she's like, he would take me and my son to Applebee's and, send me flowers. And I'm like, okay. So I was like, well, how long has this been going on? So she tells me how long they had been dating or whatever. And I was like, around the time me and his mom started really having issues, right? So I was like, okay. So she told me that every time he comes over my house, he's in a pink car. So he would go over her house in his mom's car.
So
So
if
I
you
was
ever
like,
saw a car, you wouldn't think it was him.
right. So I was like, okay. So I said, I cannot believe this. And she's like, well, I don't believe he's married. She's telling me that she don't believe he's married. I said, I'll tell you what then. I'm gonna shoot you my address. He's on his way home. Come on over here. So when he gets home from work, I need you to sit in his living room. So that was the dumbest shit I could ever do, was get that lady my address. She comes over there, right? She's sitting down. She walks in. She sees our photos all around the house. So clearly she knows we're married, right? So she sits down, and what she did, she had her phone in her hand. She was texting him. And now I can see, because mind you, now I got the laptop up, so I can see every incoming text that he's getting. I don't know what number it's coming from, but it says incoming text and the time. So I'm like, I asked her, I said, hey, why are you texting him? Because now he's not coming home. Because she's telling him,
Absolutely not.
I'm at your house. Like, you lied to me. I'm at your house with your wife. So now he's not coming home. He's not coming. I said, you just messed the whole plan up. So she was like, well, I tell you what, this is how she kind of got on my side. She's like, I tell you what, I take him breakfast every morning. And before he gets his day started, I take him breakfast. I was like, you take him breakfast?
Like up to his job?
Yes. She's like, yes, I take him breakfast every morning before he gets his day started. And I'm like, okay. So she said, what I can do is I can take him breakfast tomorrow and you be sitting around the corner and you just kind of pull up. And I was like, bet, let's do that. So I think he felt, because now you've already told him you're at his house. So now he feels some type of way. He's not going to take no calls from you. He's not going to do any of that. So anyway, she's sitting outside. The plan kind of went sour. He's calling me like he had never called me like this. He's calling me like every 5 minutes. Babe, what you doing? I'm like, babe, I'm at home sleep. What's up? And he's like, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. You good? He was like, yeah, I'm just checking on you. I know you wasn't feeling good. I was like, no, I'm great. So I'm literally sitting across the street watching him, right? So the girl is there. He's inside of the building. She's sitting outside of the building. So she says he won't come outside. She's like, I keep calling him, but he won't come outside. I said, I tell you what to do. I said, because he's such a gentleman. He's a real sweetheart. He's a gentle giant. Just call him and tell him, hey, I'm having car problems. My car won't start up. He's gonna come outside. So she texts him. She's like, hey, I'm having car problems and my car won't start. Can you come help me? Boom. I see the door open. I see him come outside. So I swoop in the parking lot. I jump out the car and I was like, oh, babe, I'm sorry. Are you with one of your customers? And this bitch went off on me. She was like,
I know you lying.
She said, you know I'm not his customer. And I was like, excuse me? I don't know you, ma'am. So I'm trying to introduce myself, right? Trying to play it off. But she was like mad. She's like, yeah. She told him everything right then and there. So he then goes inside. He grabs my hand. We walk inside. He's like, baby, look, I'm sorry. I met her on this date. And I was like, yeah, I know. I heard you been on. No, I'm lying. Take that back. He's like, she's one of my customers, and she just kind of came on to me, and I was just like, I told her that I was married, but she really didn't. No, he's like, I told her I was married. I was like, no, you didn't tell her you were married. I said, you can miss me with that one. So he was like, no, seriously. And he was like, please, let's work this out. Like, don't leave. Like, I apologize, like everything. And I knew the girl wasn't lying. She told me, she's like, they went to the casino. She said, he took me to the casino and he hit for like a couple $1,000s. I don't know how much it was. And I said, she said she drove, right? And I said, well, did he give you any money? She said, he gave me $50. I said, oh, you a dumbass. I said, I'd have left him right there. If he hit for all those, I think she said he hit for like 10,000. She told me everything.
Yeah, and if I'm your girlfriend, you give me $50. Like,
yeah. So she said, and I drove you here, right? So at that point in time, I'm like embarrassed because I'm like, anybody that could have been at our wedding could have saw you outside in public with this girl. You know what I mean? Even though you try to take her out of the city, but still, people go to that casino and people know. So fast forward, we talked about it. I tried to forgive him for that. And I was like, I ain't gonna trip on it. One night, he didn't come home. And no, we were arguing. No, we we were still having our differences about this whole situation. So he's like, well, I'm just gonna stay at my grandma's house until we can figure this out. So I was like, okay, cool. So he's at his grandmother's house, and we're on the phone. It was like we were still together, but we were living in separate homes. And he was like, one night he was like, he was rushing me off the phone. Now, keep in mind the incident that just happened the week prior about the girl. So I was like, I'm wondering if he's, still in communication with this girl. She calls me. She had called me. She's like, I'm in love with him, and I'm never leaving him alone, and he's good to me and my son, and blah blah blah. So I'm like, okay, cool. Now here's where it gets juicy. He rushed me off the phone one night, and I was like, this ain't like him to rush me off the phone. So as much as I felt it in my heart that it was gonna break my heart when I rode by his grandmother's house, I knew he wasn't gonna be there. I was like, I just know his car is not gonna be there. As soon as I hit that corner in Drummond, my heart just sunk because his car was not there. I was like, and I knew that his car wasn't parked in the garage because we still had our furniture in the garage. So I was like, he's not here. Where can he be? I called one of his employees in the middle of the night. I called one of his employees because she was a female. So I knew she could kind of relate, I was like, hey, I need you to do me a favor. She's like, what? I said, you remember that girl that came up to the job the other day? I said, you know her? She's like, I don't know her. She said, but she comes up there all the time. And I was like, okay, I need you to go into y'all database. I need you to give me her address. And she did.
Yes.
She did.
Come on, girl.
Yeah, she did. She's like, Tori, I'm gonna give it to you. She gave it to me. And I pull up. No. The story gets even better. When she gives me the address, I recognize this address. I'm like, shit. So I'm looking at this address. I'm like, bingo. One of my exes live here. I called my ex and I was like, listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to do me a huge favor. And he was like, what's that? I said, can you go and see if you see this car outside? I give him the make and the model of the car, right? And he's like, all right. He's like, yeah, I see it. I said, bet. I pull up. And I went to make sure that it was his car. So I looked inside and I saw a bag to his favorite retail store. So I was like, yep, this is him. So mind you, I got the girl's apartment number. So I go all the way up to the 3rd floor. I knock on the door. She comes to the door and she's like, how can I help you? I said, tell my husband to come outside. And she was like, you need to leave my house. And I said, no, you need to tell my husband to come outside. So she's like, no, you need to leave my house. And I was like, no. So she slams the door. She goes inside. So then now I'm pissed because it's probably like 2 or 3 in the morning. So now I'm beating on her door. So of course, when you're beating on somebody's door, the neighbors come outside. So one of the neighbors came outside. It's a black guy. He's like, everything all right? And she opens the door. She said, "Ma, this old ghetto ass bitch at my door." I'm like, ghetto? I'm like, ghetto. So I'm like,
my husband in there.
Yeah. So now she's mad at me, girl. She went back inside. She grabbed the knife, and I told her, I said, "Bitch, if you stab me, I said you better use that knife." So she